For this week's video, I'm going to show you guys how I edit all of my photos. So I'm just going to get on the computer now. So this is essentially how I have Lightroom set up. I have my presets over here, and then I just have a few images down here. These are the ones that I'm going to edit during this video. I have kind of a combination of different ones. I have some film images. I have some from my Fujifilm camera, as well as some from my Canon cameras. So I'm just going to go through each of these and show you how I would typically edit them. So this first image is a film image taken on one of my Pentax point and shoots. And basically the first thing that I noticed with this is it's kind of off balance. It seems like it's tilted to the left slightly. So I would go in here and adjust that. Typically I'll just click auto and see what it gives me. And that's fine. Like the buildings are all kind of lined up now the way that they should be, but then the timestamp is really thrown off now. So I don't really like that. And I think that the best thing for this is just for the timestamp to be level. So I'll just come back. Actually, I'll just reset it. So I'll just leave this as is, because with the timestamp, I kind of just like it to be, horizontal and not angled at all. And that's what I did with this photo. I didn't really do a whole lot with it when I originally edited it. And so the only thing I ended up doing actually was bringing up the saturation a little bit. And so what I'll do is I'll do the extremes and see where it is. And then I'll start to come back down and try to find a place where I like it. So I think I'd like it around 25 to 27. Because, some of the colors in the neon signs just look a lot better. Timestamp shows up a bit better. You can see the car lights a little bit better and just looks nicer. And then to be able to compare these things, I'll just go back, reset it, and, Command Z to see what the differences are. And then I can also do side by side to really see what the differences are, because I don't want to do anything too extreme, because if you do something too extreme, people are going to definitely be able to notice that it's edited, and that's not what I want it to look like. So I just do something simple, and that's pretty much all I would do for this image. I like the imperfections of this image. I'm not going to adjust anything with any of the dust. That's kind of like what I like in this photo. So for this one specifically, just upping the saturation, and that's literally all I'm doing. The next photo was from my Fujifilm camera, and if you might have noticed on my presets, I only have 4 presets. I have Canon, I have Fujifilm, and I have 2 black and whites. So essentially all I do is I'll click on my Fujifilm preset, which adjusts it to pretty much exactly what I would want. And you can see the side by side, the differences. You can see that this one's a little bit warmer, and yeah, it just looks a lot better than unedited. So I'll go back here and start adjusting a few more things. Typically, this is what my custom white balance is for this preset. I'll just click auto to see what that gives me. And I actually like auto more than I like what I typically use. And then I'll take a look at everything. It's a little zoomed in there. And see if there's any colors that I don't like compared to the original, which there isn't. So the only other thing that I would do now is crop it. And I think I like it around here. Maybe a little bit more over. Well, maybe about there. Just so that you get more of the details, and there's just some unwanted space off the sides as well as on the top. There was just, you could see the actual horizon line, and I don't really think it's necessary to be able to see that in this photo. So I'm just going to remove it entirely. And the only other thing that I noticed is I add quite a bit of grain to this preset, and I don't typically use a lot of grain in the landscape photos. So I'll go down to grain and bring this down to like 15. just so that it looks a little bit smoother and looks a little bit nicer. The next photo was also taken on my Fujifilm camera, and this is in Chinatown. So I just come over here and I add the preset. As you can tell, not that big of a difference, but definitely makes the difference that I want it to. So you can see that the ISO, I turned it up quite a bit because it's a nighttime image. So I'll bring the grain down because there's already quite a bit of added noise due to the ISO being so high. So I don't want to add to it with unnecessary grain. And then next I'll take a look at things like auto white balance. Obviously I don't want it to look like that, so I'll leave it somewhere around here, and maybe I'll make my own adjustments, see if it needs to be a little bit warmer or anything, which I don't really think is necessary. I think it's pretty good right as is with the custom one. I did notice when comparing these side by side, obviously the shadows are up quite a bit, and I think I might drop those down slightly just to give it a little bit more of that moody tone. And that's pretty much it. That's about all I will do to this image. There's not much else. Everything else looks pretty good. So next, this is another Fujifilm image, and right away you can tell that this is kind of at an angle, and I don't know if I want it there. So I'll click auto, see if I like that more. And I do, and then I see this headlight over here. I don't really want that involved, so I'm just going to move it about there. See how I like that. That looks pretty good for the most part. Then I'll go ahead and add the preset. So immediately I can tell that I don't really want much grain added onto here because the leaves are so small that I'd rather get the detail of the leaves than the grain. So I'll bring that down to probably like 10. And then again, I'll go back to auto white balance, see if I like that. I think that this is a little bit too pink for the auto, so I'll bring that down slightly. And then I also think it could be warmed up a little bit. Probably about there. And then I can also notice that on this area of the car, it's a little bit blown out, a little bit more than I would want it to be. I just want to bring that detail in a little bit more. So I'll bring the highlights down slightly and see how that adjusts the rest of the image. And I'll probably bring the exposure up just slightly to add that back since I brought some of the highlights down. And yeah, that looks pretty good to me. Not a whole lot else that I would really do to it. The next image is my first Canon one that I'll show you guys. As you can see, there's not a ton of information up here, and that's because I used an FD lens on this image. So again, the first thing I'll do is click auto, see if it does anything. Not a whole lot there because this is pretty lined up. And then I'll go to the Canon film look. And as you can see, this one makes pretty dramatic difference because I'm changing it from RAW rather than a JPEG with the Fujifilms. So I'll test the auto white balance, see what happens. Looks pretty good. And then I think the exposure is a little too high, so I'll bring that down. Maybe about here. And yeah, that's pretty much the majority of what I'm going to do with this. I'm going to bring the grain down a little bit, again, because this is a landscape image. I don't like adding a lot of grain to the landscape images. Bring that down about there. And then just to be able to compare it, to make sure that I didn't go anything too extreme, I'll just reset it and then check back and forth, and then I can check the side by side. And I like that pretty nicely. Not a whole lot else I would do to it. Next is another Canon image, so I'll just click on the Canon preset. And then I'll go up to the white balance, auto, see what happens. Not a whole lot right now, especially because it's pretty blown out. So I'll bring the exposure down somewhere where I think I'd like it, which I think I'd go about here, maybe a little bit lower. Yeah, maybe about here. And then there's a little bit of detail missing here, so I might bring the shadows up just slightly so we can see everything a little bit nicer. And then there's not a whole lot else I would really do to this. I might test the white balance a little bit more to see how warm I really want it. Probably leave it around here. And then the sky might need to be a little bit more blue, so then that's something that I'll go back into the color selector and check on. So I obviously have all of these adjusted in the preset, and going off of that, with the presets, I haven't really decided if I want to give these away or sell these. I'm not sure if anybody would actually be interested or not, or what is the situation with presets. I know a lot of people sell them. Not really sure if that's something that I want to do or not, but maybe you guys can leave a comment down below and let me know if that's something you would be interested in. So maybe I'll increase the saturation of the blue just slightly. I don't want to do anything too extreme because I can see that it's already adjusting things with the car in like the windshield area and on the back a little bit. So maybe I'll just add it a little bit of saturation to it. And then that'd be done. So you went from that to that. Let's see it side by side. Might even be a little bit too warm still. Yeah, I think I like that a little bit better. So yeah, that would be how I edit that image. Next is photo of Monique while we're at Salvation Mountain. Again, this is on the Canon 80D with an FD lens. So I'll just click on the Canon film look. You can tell that it's obviously quite a bit overexposed, so I'll bring this back down. And I kind of do like the overexposed look on this photo in general. And then I'll click auto, see where the white balance goes. And yeah, I mean, since there's a lot of different colors in this, you don't want to adjust anything because it'll get a little crazy. But yeah, the exposure seems to be about right there. And everything looks good besides that. She looks a little bit too dark because of the way that the sun was shining. It was a little bit behind her with the shadow in front. So I could consider using the brush tool and maybe bringing her up a little bit. We'll see. We're going to check on it quick. So essentially what I would do for that is I think I would bring the shadows up maybe 20. I always click O so I can see the red color when I go over this first so that I make sure that I'm doing it correctly. Making sure that I get over all of her, not missing anything. And I can obviously zoom in a lot more. I'm not doing this as accurate as I normally would. And then you can just click O. And it looks a little bit better. And then I'll go down sometimes to history and just click back and forth. Doesn't make too big of a difference, but it makes that little bit of a difference where you can see her just that much better. And so one last thing is I would look at grain again and see where I like that, because this is kind of a landscape image. And I think I like it a little bit higher actually, because I like how it looks in the sky as well as down here. Looks nice. So yeah, I would probably leave it about there. And then just to make sure I didn't do anything too extreme, I'll look at them side by side. The one on the right is definitely more accurate to what I was actually seeing. It was unbelievably hot out at Salvation Mountain. It was over 100 degrees. Definitely more warm tones like this rather than a little bit more flat and a lot of blues and whatnot involved in this one. So I'm much happier with the edited version of this. I could maybe look at the white balance and see if it could come down slightly, but I'm happy where it's at right now. And again, when it comes to editing things, I don't love to go through and edit. That's why I made these presets so that I can just click one and it's essentially a one size fits all. And these are specifically for my cameras and my settings. My Fujifilm goes along with my JPEG settings that I mentioned in my X100S video, and all of the Canon settings could actually go for any Canon RAW file, because as you'll see later, I have two different Canon cameras that I use and it works for both of them. So this next photo is another film image. This one was taken on the AE1, and first thing that I notice is the white balance might be a little off. I don't like that white balance, so I'll just reset it. And I might just make some smaller adjustments. Bring it down a little bit. Bring that up just slightly. Also make sure that this is straight. I don't like how that looks. It lined up the roof of this, but it made this all wonky. So I'm just gonna reset that rather than using it. And I might brighten the image up slightly. It's a little bit darker than I would like. And maybe I might warm it up. Bring it back a little bit. And then it's a little bit flat now. So I'm going to bring the shadows down. Maybe a little bit warmer. Yeah. Let's just go back to 0. So then the only other thing that I'm looking at now is the sky. I'm not sure if I like how blue it is. Haven't really decided yet. It would kind of depend on, what I'm using the image for as well. If it's supposed to go with a set of other photos, I'm going to try to make it look as similar to the other ones as possible. But when you're doing standalone photos, you can kind of do whatever you want. This blue, it's fine. It's a little bit more saturated than I would like, so I would probably just decrease it a little bit and just call this good there. And then you can kind of see the before and after. Reset it. And yeah, it's just some minor adjustments, but makes it look a little bit better and closer to what I saw in real life and closer to what I want my images to look like. The next image is, again, film shot on the AE1. And so this one, first thing I would do, again, is check the auto white balance. I think that makes it a little too pink, so I'll go back to as shot. I know that the pink definitely needs to come up, but it doesn't need to be as extreme as they made it in the auto version. So I'll bring that up slightly. And then I also want a warmer image. So I think I'll bring this up to about 8. So some of you might think that this is pretty good at this point, but when I was actually there, it looked a lot different than what this image looks like. So I have to make several more adjustments to get it exactly where I want it to be. So I'm going to bring this down just slightly because I want it to be able to bring up the shadows a little bit. Actually, I might bring down the shadows. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm going to bring down the shadows. Maybe we'll just bring this back up to 0. And then the main thing that I want to adjust is this yellow. It didn't really look like this when I was there. It looked a lot more towards an orange. So I'll go through here and adjust that. It was more that color. Yeah, I like that. And then there's a few other things like the sign. I like this red, but I think it could stand out a little bit better. So I'm going to bring the saturation up. And then the blue as well. I noticed this blue over here could stand out a bit better, as well as the blue in the back. So I'll take a look at saturation as well, see where that gets me. And it brings it back in the sky a little bit, which I kind of like. Bring that about there. And yeah, I think that at this point it would pretty much be good. I'm seeing over here that this is a little bit bright, so I'm going to see what happens if I bring the highlights down a little bit. And see, that brings in some of that detail again. So I'm going to bring that down, and then that looks a little bit better. It's not so blown out. Get a little bit more detail there. And then I'll look at the before and after. Sometimes with the landscape images, it's just better to reset and Command Z it to see if anything's wonky. And I think I'm pretty happy with how that looks. The next image is another film one, and this is again on the AE1. And with this image, there's not really a ton that I would do, because when I look at it, what exactly would I want to do? I would maybe look at the white balance. I don't really like what it did with auto. If anything, I think it could maybe be brought down slightly. It's a little warm in the shadows. So I'll bring it down a little bit. And then that looks a little bit better. I'll just reset it to see what that looks like before and after. And I like that. And maybe I could add some more contrast. Nope, I don't think I would do that. Let's see what happens if I drop the shadows. Could maybe drop the shadows a little bit, but I kind of like the look that it gives with them being brought up so much. They could be brought down slightly. And then the other thing that I have done with film that sometimes I like is I'll take a look at the monochrome if I don't love the colors in it. And I do like this quite a bit, actually. And this is something that I would be pretty happy with by itself. I just adjust it slightly and then change it to monochrome, or I could do it in color. It really wouldn't make a difference to me. I could do these either way. And with your images, you can do, anything you want. Next, I have another Fujifilm photo. And so the first thing I'll do is I'll add the preset. And I'll show you what that looks like before and after with the JPEG. So then I'll take a look at the auto white balance. I don't like that. It's way too cold. So I'll bring that back. I might actually want to warm this up a little bit because that's a little bit more what it was like when I was there. And then the exposure is a little bit too bright right now. So I think I'll bring it down about there because it was at golden hour. Oops, zoomed in a little too much. And that looks pretty nice right there. Just in case, I'll check to see what it does with the auto. I think that's a little too much, so I might just reset that, leave it as is. And there's no cropping that I would really do. At this point, I would check to see what it looked like side by side with the other one. As you can see, just a little bit warmer. The greens stand out a little bit too much, so I might take a look at that. If they need to be either brightened up or bring some saturation, or what I need to do exactly. I think that it was just pushed a little bit more towards the aqua than I would normally do for something like this. So I would just push it in the other direction so it doesn't look like too extreme with some of this dead grass in the area as well as up here. So I think that this is pretty much where I would have it. I don't think I would do a whole lot else. I'd reset just to make sure. You can see that the door, you can see that a little bit better. Maybe I'll look at the shadows just to double check if there's anything I want to do. Might bring them down a little bit. Maybe I'll bring up the exposure slightly. And yeah, I think that's about where I want it. And now this is the last image. And like I said, my Canon preset will work for any Canon RAW, any raw Canon photos. So this was shot with Monique's G7X, and so the first thing that I would do with this one is wasn't shot, or it's not showing up as it was shot. So go to original, take a look at that, and as you can see, there's like this guy off to the side and just a few things that I don't really want to be in the photo. So first, I'm going to crop it. It'll be easier to just crop him out. And I think I'll crop it to about here. Make sure that this is as centered as possible. And then next, as you can see, there's a helicopter in the background, which is kind of cool, but not really what I want right now. So I'm just going to get it out of there. There's this surfer back here. I'm going to remove him as well. And then there's a satellite that you can see up here that I'm just going to get rid of. And so then that just cleans up the image quite a bit. So then I'll go to the Canon Film Look preset, take a look at what that looks like. And again, the default for my preset is to have the exposure increased. Doesn't really need that. So I'll bring that back down probably about here. And this looks pretty good so far. I'm going to see what the auto white balance does. And I actually like what this color looks like more than what it just did. It's a little too pink in this one. And I like these colors a little bit more because this is more what it actually looked like when I was there. So again, sometimes I'll check to make sure that I didn't go too extreme with anything. So then the last thing that I'm going to look at is saturation, and I'll just see exactly where I want that to be at. I definitely want more so that the sunset is a little bit more pronounced, as well as the surfboard. And I think that looks pretty good. Just going to double check that everything's lined up with the horizon line. And yeah, I think that that looks pretty good right about here. And so then the last thing that I would do is I would go export everything, grab all of them, file, export, and then I just export them to my desktop in a folder. These are all my settings. I just do the resolution at 300, and yeah, those are the settings that I typically use. Then I just hit export, and that would be that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and maybe learned a thing or two. Like I said earlier, if you guys are interested in purchasing my presets, go ahead and leave a comment. And if enough people are interested, I will try to make those available. But I just want everybody to keep in mind that if you are wanting to purchase my presets for the Fujifilm one specifically, that you will also need to use my JPEG settings that I mentioned in my X100S video. So if you guys have any other questions, go ahead and leave a comment down below. But with all that being said, go ahead and like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next Tuesday.